Morning, Honorable Nkosi.
Molo, Honorable Sheikh.
Morning, Honorable Suleku. And I think Honorable Zanamela is with us as well. I think, Honorable Bartlett will be joining us a bit late. Currently, there's a Works Forum meeting which she's attending, but she will join us.
Honorable Suleku, hi.
Honorable Nkosi, hi too.
Sleep.
Fighter.
Thini sleep.
Akhona indoda kunjani?
Fondeni ulahlile kaloku.
Awuze Kapa kaloku.
Asasi alliance ya.
Uze kaloku. Holiday. Uze sekhulule.
Ngathi uhamba nokhongolosi.
Ngeke.
Uyazi wena uhamba na.
Ngihamba nawe mfethu.
Ngifana
Uyaphi naye?
Ukhongolose uthi mandithi step aside.
wena uhamba nami mfondini uyazi.
Sihamba sonke yazi nje.
Yeah. Sifuna ukubhuca phansi lokhongolosi.
Siyabangena sinombuso.
Siyabangena. Efondini zakubona iveki ezayo.
Okay, ngizobe ndikhona.
Yes, eKapa.
Ubeke
ibhotile.
Ngokubeka iwine.
Akongxaki.
Okay.
Andaza andikho choose mfondini.
Okanye kuthengela ijayi.
Nditsha konke.
Okanye ufuna itwiza okanye ijayi.
Noma intoni mfundi. Nditsha konke.
Yiza ndoda.
Sure.
Nisile nina, nisile.
Mama Nkosi kunjani?
Mkhaya.
Phila Mkhaya, nisile nina, nisile Mkhaya, nisile noyithu.
Siyazincokolela.
Akusukusa lokhu kuphatha Mkhaya ngithi siphethe.
Niphethe kabi.
Siniphethe Mkhaya.
Niphethe kabi, niphethe ngebhotile.
Konke Mkhaya siyahlanganisa.
Okay, hlanganisani sizawudibana thina nani.
Siyaza sidibane neKapa.
Okay Mkhaya, okay, good right Seleku, sidibane eKapa mfana.
Okay ma, makube njalo.
Sure.
Good morning, honorable members, Honorable Deputy Minister and the team from the Department of Home Affairs. Let me take this opportunity to welcome the department and honorable members to this meeting. Honorable members, today we will be dealing with the Department of Home Affairs APPN budget for the 2021-22 financial year. This is probably the first time that we as a committee are meeting along with the department. We did meet with them last year, but together with the portfolio committee. However, seeing that we're meeting the department by ourselves, we also requested the department to also provide us specific information. But also given the fact that we the Select Committee on Security and Justice within the National Council of Provinces, and that we represent provinces to ensure that provincial interests are taken into account in the national sphere of government, which is also in line with Section 42, subsection 4 of the Constitution. So as I've said, that we've requested the department in their presentation to also reflect on provincial achievements and challenges, as well as the implementation of the Border Management Authority Act, particularly given that as a committee, we deliberated at length and we passed this legislation at the beginning of the 6th Parliament. However, also given that the COVID-19 pandemic is also, that we're still facing this challenge as a country, it will also be important for the department to reflect on some of these challenges as they pertain to the APPN budget. And I think with that being said, let me hand over to the Honorable Deputy Minister then to take us through the budget and the APP of the department. And I think thereafter, members will then be allowed to deliberate on the presentation. Honorable Deputy Minister.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I would like to extend my greetings to all the members of the committee. I've gotten used to the fact that I know you so much because I've been here for quite a number of times, but on other matters from the time when we were dealing with the bill on the BMA and so on, and the Electoral Amendment Act and other issues. So it is always an honor for us to be part of these meetings, wherein we can share with the standing committee on matters that we are handling with the Department of Home Affairs. And having passed my greetings to the members, I would like to just introduce our team. We are here with the Director General for Home Affairs, Tomi Makhote, who has been appointed. I don't think we have come here to introduce him before. I will request that probably he turns his video on so can have sight of him. There is DG Tomi Makhote. And then we have other members from the EXCO, Bay. We've got the Commissioner for the BMA, the Border Management Authority, as well as DDG McKay dealing with immigration services, DDG Mavuso, whom I think you know very well, and DDG Skama and DDG Muhoboko, who are all here. We are here to present the annual performance plan for the department, and the areas that we are really going to cover is what becomes our contribution to the National Development Plan, so that we can have an understanding on what we seek to do and how do we contribute in the overarching plan of government. We're also gonna deal with the issue of the MTSF commitments for 2019 up until 2024, as well as the progress on the National Information System, as well as e-visa. Those are some of our flagship projects that we are dealing with. And then we look at the impact of COVID, because honestly, COVID has had quite a disastrous impact in terms of our operations. As you will know, that we had to firstly suffer budget cuts quite substantially so that we can reprioritize funding. So that impacted on what we were able to do as a department, but also at an operational level, we had quite a number of operational downtime, some offices having to close down due to COVID-19, including head office, PVR, and our operational centers. So it resulted in us having to really rethink in terms of how we target, but we can assure the committee that these targets that we are presenting are processed in a proper way using scientific evidence as well as considerations from the public service. So the other issues that we will deal with is then targets per division in terms of civics, in terms of immigration services, and in terms of the BMA and the administration. We'll then also look at DHA budget as well as provincial budgets, which I think is what is important for this community to understand the kind of service delivery we are going to be rendering out to various provinces. And we'll then look at our APP targets, for instance, around birth registration, which we had to now reduce to about 700,000, but growing up to 710 over the period between now and 2024. We'll look at smart card IDs. We'll also look at immigration services as well as administration targets. But to go deeper into the presentation, I will request that through you, Chair, we allow DDG Tommy Makote to then take us through the presentation, having made that introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. Please continue. DG.
Good morning, Honorable Chair. Good morning to Honorable members and my colleagues that are joining us this morning. Rian, if we can move the slides to the presentation mode. Thank you so much. If we can move to, I think the next slide, the Deputy Minister has already given the outline of the presentation, so I'm not going to repeat. We can move to the next one. So the purpose really, Chairperson, you have asked us to come and present to the Select Committee on Security and Justice on our annual performance plan for the financial year, but also provide an overview of the budget. And then there are issues that this committee specifically indicated that we needed to come and present on. The first one is on key provincial achievements and challenges, including issues around staffing and resourcing. The second one is the impact, as you indicated, of COVID on resourcing and current vacancies. And then we'll also share with the committee the impact of COVID-19 on service delivery at a provincial level and also reflected at head office. And then we'll conclude with the presentation by the Acting Commissioner of the Border Management Authority, Mr. Jean Ravere, on the overview of the Border Management Authority. If we can move to the next one. So we thought we should remind the committee about our vision, mission, mandate, values, and outcomes. Of course, we strive to ensure that we build a South Africa where identity, status, and citizenships are key enablers of citizen empowerment and inclusivity, economic development, and national security. And of course, we carry out this mission in line with the commitment to citizen empowership, inclusivity, economic development, and national security. And how do we then do this? We do this by ensuring that we are efficient and secure, the custodian of citizenship and civil registration. We also ensure that we secure and strategically manage international migration, but also efficiently managing asylum seekers and refugees, and also determining and safeguarding the official identity and status of person. And of course, our mandate is broadly divided into two categories, which is really civic services and immigration services. And the mandate is clearly indicated below. If we can move to the next one. Chair, we also thought we reflect on our values to this committee that we espouse as a department. We want to commit ourselves to ensuring that we are a people-centered and caring department. We are patriotic, professional, and showing leadership, effective, efficient, and innovative, ethical, and of course, having integrity. And of course, we all need to ensure that all our employees at all times are security conscious and they are also development orientated. So there are these outcomes for the MTSF for the next 5 years that we've identified between the period 2020 to 2025. And amongst others is to ensure that we secure the management of international migration, resulting in South Africa's interests being served and fulfilled, including, of course, our global commitments. But secondly, we want to ensure that we secure an efficient management of citizenship and civil registration to fulfill the constitutional and international obligations. And I think I've spoken earlier on to the efficient asylum seeker and refugee system, which complies not only with our domestic, but also with our global obligations. And the fourth one is to ensure that we secure the population register to empower citizens, enable inclusivity, economic development, and national security. And the last one, of course, is to ensure that we position the Department of Home Affairs to positively contribute to a capable and developmental state. We can move to the next one. Then we also thought, as the Deputy Minister indicated, that we do contribute to the NDP. Just to remind the committee that the major focus of the NDP is to confront the interlinked challenges of poverty, inequality, and unemployment so that we achieve that higher growth rate. Now, as the Department of Home Affairs, we have a critical contribution to make towards the attainment of these targets that are identified in Vision 2030. Amongst others, we want to ensure the inclusion of all citizens in democracy and development that is enabled by providing them with a status and an identity that gives them access to rights and services. And this must be done, Chair, in an efficient, effective, and professional and secured manner. But secondly, the second priority is to ensure that we facilitate the acquisition of the critical skills required for economic growth as determined by the Department of Higher Education and Training, so that we build our own timber locally. And the third one is to ensure that we continue to drive an integrated and coordinated border management to ensure that our borders are effectively protected, secured, and well managed. And we also play a critical role in enabling regional development, not only by working with SADC through the Department of DERCO, in order to ensure that we establish an efficient, secure, and managed migration. And as indicated in the previous slide, we believe that we are quite central in building a capable state. And of course, we hope we'll be able to execute this through the modernization program of the Department of Home Affairs, which we believe, amongst others, will be able to reduce fraud and the cost of doing business by enabling e-government and also to attract more investment into the country. If we can move to the next one. Chair, we also thought we should share our MTSF commitments for the period 2019 to 2024 with the committee. On your left, it's the Apex priorities that we contribute to. The first one is economic transformation and job creation. And that's linked to outcome 4, which speaks to creating decent employment through inclusive economic growth. And our contribution is really in 3 areas in this area. One is to ensure the identity of citizens and foreigners. The second one is to design and the implementation of the National Identity System, or NIS as it's called. And then it's the issuance of critical skills visas and the implementation of a visa regime in support of economic growth. And then on your extreme right, it's really the MTS commitments as per the DPME. And in there, it's to ensure that there's an implementation of a revised visa regime through 95% of critical skills visas adjudicated within a period of 4 weeks. And then the second Apex priority that we contribute to, it's on social cohesion and ensuring that the safe communities, which is linked to outcome 3, which speaks to ensuring that all people in the South African Republic are and feel safe. Our commitment or our contribution in this regard is through ensuring that we have secured borders of the country through the establishment and the operationalization of the Border Management Authority. We want to continue with the implementation of a risk-based approach to immigration by providing enabling documents so that people can have access rights and services. Amongst others, it's the birth registration and smart ID cards. And the MTSF target, as highlighted, we want to ensure that we incrementally establish the BMA by the period highlighted in there, and also to ensure that the Border Management Authority is operational at 36 ports of entry, and the other details are provided. The Commissioner will get into details in this specific area. If we can move to the next one. The third apex priority that we contribute to is building a capable, ethical, and developmental state, which is linked to outcome 12, and that speaks to an efficient, effective, and development-oriented public service. And we believe that we'll contribute to this by ensuring that we reposition the Department of Home Affairs in support of a capable, ethical, and developmental state through the implementation of a new service delivery operating model. And of course, this will be supported by the required policy and legislative framework. And then, of course, there's the ongoing chairperson modernization program of the Department of Home Affairs. And we also believe that through the establishment and operationalization of the BMA will make an enormous contribution. And if you look on the right, there's no direct commitment that's included in the MTSF for this priority. And the last priority that we are committed to is ensuring that we work towards a better Africa and the world. And this is linked to outcome 11, which speaks to creating a better South Africa and a better Africa and a better world. And of course, we believe that through the introduction of a world-class e-visa regime and rollout of the e-visa, we will enable that we execute that. Again, there's no direct commitment that's included in the MTSF with regards to this priority. If we can move to the next one. We also thought, Chair, will provide an update to this committee on two important aspects. It's actually three. I'll come back to the next one. The first one is really the National Identity System, or NIS. We have developed a National Identity System specification document, and we have been working with the State Information Technology Agency known as SITA in partnership with the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, the CSIR, to ensure readiness once a decision on a development partner has been made. And the progress that we have been made around this area is that we were supposed to have commenced the procurement process for this work in the 2020-21 financial year. However, Chairperson, due to the security nature of this project and the risks associated with the open bidding process for a program of this magnitude, we are of the view in following engagements with Treasury that we need to explore other options in order to procure this system. The second area that we thought we should highlight is really where we are with regards to the e-visa. And just a reminder that our modernization program seeks to improve service delivery and efficiencies. And one of the modernization tools is through the introduction and implementation of an e-visa system. The update that we have in this area, as we do know that as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, as we recover, challenges around the pandemic remain, but we're intending to roll out the e-visa system and service to visitors from China, India, Nigeria, and Kenya. And then there's 10 other countries that are identified, which will include Cameroon, the DRC, Egypt, Ethiopia, Mexico, Uganda, and Saudi Arabia, Iran, Philippines, and Pakistan. Of course, the rollout of this e-visa system, Chairperson, is subject to lockdown regulations of not only the earmarked countries due to the COVID-19, but also it's also dependent on the DECO upgrade of the connectivity in their missions and the appropriate resources that are required. If we can move to the next one. So we also thought we should speak to some of the issues that this committee requested us to reflect on, in particular around the impact of COVID-19 on the departmental planning and operations. The reality is, Chair, COVID-19 has had an impact on the departmental operations and our planning processes, and I'd like to state a few points in relation to this. The first one is that our strategic planning process started in earnest during the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, this new normal, Chair, therefore necessitated the introduction of a scenario or risk-based approach in terms of target setting, in particular for those targets that have volumes, so that we are able to also comply with COVID-19 regulations. The second one, Chair, the impact of the pandemic on the remainder in terms of the targets for the medium-term strategic framework or MTSF period, it's also difficult to predict. We now know, Chair, that in other provinces in the country, there's that resurgence with regards to the infection rate. So it's very difficult to predict some of these issues. But we also now know that the number of countries, for example, Germany, India, and others are still currently battling, including Brazil, with what both scientists and government have termed as the third wave. So our planning and operations will always be impacted by what I've just stated. The third area to highlight, Chair, is that our planning process took place against a bleak economic outlook. As we indicated in the slides, the IMF and also our own South African Reserve Bank are predicting that the economy will grow between 3.1 to 3.6%. Now, the economic outlook, therefore, has an impact in terms of our Home Affairs vote baseline for the period 2021 to 2024. And the CFO will provide details when he speaks to the finances later. Amongst others, for example, our baseline will be reduced by about 3.2 billion over the MTF period. And this includes a 2.4 billion cut in the compensation of employees' budget, which has huge implications in terms of our operations. And of course, it will have an impact, Chair, on critical areas of our operations, such as our frontline operations, information system, and of course, immigration. The fourth point to raise, Chair, COVID-19 has had an impact on some of our operations. On this slide, bullet point number 4, on immigration services, for example, they've had to downscale their operations in the permitting and asylum seeker management. Further, there was an impact, of course, on the partnership that we have with VFS when they had to close their offices as a result of lockdown regulations. This therefore meant, Chair, the applications could not be received through VFS. If we can move to the next page, Muzi. And then on civic services, the impact has really been on us having to reduce our services as we implemented COVID-19 regulations and protocols. This therefore resulted in reduced capacity as we implemented those protocols and space, because we then had to also implement, Chairperson, the social distancing, for example, in our offices. Whereas an office could process more than 100 people at a time seated on the benches, we now had to ensure that those benches provided for social distancing. So maybe if we can move to the next slide, Muzi. Rian, if we can move to the next slide. But also, Chair, there are lessons that we have also learned in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic that we thought we will share with the committee. The first one is really around the importance and the centrality of the mandate of Home Affairs to the country. In particular, because there are services that were required even during the COVID-19 pandemic, in particular critical services such as death registration. And we will show in the later slides, Chair, for example, in the period December 2019, whereas we registered about 38,132 deaths, in December, this substantially increased to about 55,676. So there's a difference of 17,544 additional deaths that we had to register. Similarly, in January 2021, we registered about 78,000. And if you were to compare to the same period in the previous year where we were sitting at 26,000, there's a difference of about 42,179. And therefore, Chair, it meant we had to open our offices until quite late, in most instances until 7 o'clock on a daily basis, to ensure that this service is provided to a bereaved family. But lastly, it's really for us, based on the lessons that we've learned, to review not only our service delivery, but also our operating model to adapt to the new normal. And of course, we'll do this by ensuring that we timely communicate to our various stakeholders. And of course, we ensure that there's continuous oversight and management of staff and our resources to ensure that we service our clientele in a more effective and efficient and secured manner. If we can move to the next slide, Rian. Next one. So So similarly, Chair, this is the third area that I thought I should highlight to this committee in particular, because it's the Security and Justice Select Committee. Chair, during December 2020, we are familiar with the fact that we were in the second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic, and then there was this high demand on government to increase not only vigilance, but also to ensure that there's adherence to health and safety protocols in accordance with the disaster management regulations. And as a result, we do know that due to limitation in migratory movement and the stringent health requirements that I've stated above, it was anticipated during that period that there will be a rise in foreign nationals who will attempt to enter the Republic through non-designated border crossings. And Chair, as we saw in some of those areas, in particular, Libombo, Beitbridge, we have a slide that will be able to demonstrate some of these activities that I'm referring to. Now, and as a result of that, our immigration officials, for the first time, Chair, were deployed to be part of joint patrols with the South African National Defence Force for that period from the 2nd of January to the 21st of February, so that we support the SNDF in at identified high-risk areas along the borderline where people have a tendency to cross into the Republic illegally. So this was done to ensure that anybody who was visiting the Republic of South Africa must use the official port of entry and produce all the required documentation, as we've indicated, in particular the COVID-19 protocols. Moreover, it was also envisaged that there will be deterrence on trafficking, smuggling of any illegal activities along the borderline. If we can move to the next slide. Now, as a result of that, we deployed 60 immigration officials from our inspectorate to the borderline to support the SNDF on what they refer to as Operation Corona. And the deployments were as follows. In the northern borderline, this is around Beitbridge. From immigration, there were 12 members that were deployed, and they covered a distance of about 40 kilometers of the borderline, working with the SANDF. And then in the central Free State borderline, 12 members were deployed. And initially, they were in the Wepener and Ficksburg area. They moved to Lady Brand. And this team, Chair, small as it is, was able to cover quite a huge area, up to 120 kilometers. In the eastern and Eswatini borderline, we also had a team that covered quite a huge area, about 125 kilometers to the south and northern KZN. And mainly they were stationed in Pongola and Manguzi. This is another team that covered 115 kilometers in the Mshololo, Machobeni area. So this team was capacitated because of the border overlapping between KZN and Mpumalanga. As indicated in the initial slide, our deployment was supposed to have started from the 14th or ended on the by around the 14th of January. It was then extended to the 21 February 2021 when the regulations were amended as well. We can move to the next slide, Rian. So this slide, Chair, then provides the number of arrests that were made during the borderline patrols and the roadblocks for that period from the 3rd of January to 20 February 21. About 13,924 foreign nationals were arrested and deported during that period. Now, on your left, it's a pie chart demonstrating the percentages in terms of the number of arrests that were made. And of course, leading there, it's Mpumalanga, where we, working with the SNDF, there were 8,176, which constitutes about 59%. Arrests that were made. Of course, this is linked to the Libombo border post and the illegal crossings that were happening in that area. And then the second one will be Limpopo, in particular around Beitbridge, standing at about 3,482, which constitutes 25%. And then that's followed by the Free State, in particular. This will be in the areas between Maseru, Ficksburg, and Lady Brand, 1,523 constituting about 11%, And the last one is KZN with about 5%. What is key on this slide, Chair, to highlight to the committee is that all these foreign nationals that were arrested do not fall within the allowed categories for traveling. Instead, the majority of them were undocumented economic migrants who were trying to enter South Africa illegally without following the prescripts of the disaster management regulations, in particular the COVID-19 health certificate. If we can move to the next one. And this slide just gives you a highlight in terms of the populations that were arrested from the neighboring countries. It's a breakdown of the 13,000 that I've referred to. And you can see that Mozambicans were more, followed by Zimbabweans, and then Lesotho nationals, Swaziland nationals. And then there's the other categories in terms of the geographic location on those that were detected for third country nationals in this order. Malawans were mainly arrested in Mpumalanga, Limpopo, KZN, and the Free State, and Burundians in Limpopo and the KZN, and then Tanzanians mainly in Mpumalanga, and the Ugandans, Bangladeshis as well. If we can move to the next one. So coming back to the APP, we thought it was important to share that information because of the nature of the select committee. What then are our key priorities and considerations for the strategic plan? So if you look at our DHA annual performance plan for 2021 to 2024, we cover the following priorities and development. The first area is really around national priorities, which will include the chair, our contribution to the National Development Plan. We've already highlighted that. Apex priorities, MTSF related commitments, the commitments that were pronounced by the President in the SONA address, the National Strategic Plan or NSP on gender-based violence and femicide, and of course, the district development model. Now, key developments within government and the Department of Home Affairs are also covered in the annual performance plan, and these include the following areas. It's really our contribution to the economic recovery plan of government, and we're saying here we'll do this through the issuance of visas and permits so that we grow the economy, and of course through the ongoing review of the visa regime. This is work that DDG McKay and the team from the presidency are leading with regards to the review of the visa regime, and of course the rollout of the e-visa system. We also believe that the assenting to of the BMA Act by the President in 2020, it's an important area. And then there are key policy and legislative developments in support of national, regional, and international commitments. And this includes, Chairperson, the development of a green paper on the management of citizenship, international migration and refugee protection, the official identity management policy, and the marriage policy, which is now the green paper that the cabinet has approved so that we go out on public consultations, and then the one-stopper border post policy or OSBP, and of course the DHA bill that we are about to start finalizing. And then there's the continued modernization of the Department of Home Affairs through various initiatives of the modernization program that I referred to earlier. And then there's the phased implementation of key elements that are contained in the white paper on Home Affairs, which includes the repositioning program. And the last two include the improvement in the service delivery initiatives. Amongst others, this will include our revision of our access strategy, and then of course, the footprint development. And the last one, of course, that we spoke to, the CFO will speak to the bleak economic outlook that's facing the country, and not only Home Affairs, other government departments and other organs of the state. If we can move to the next one. So we now provide the committee with a detailed breakdown of our APP targets. We're starting with the civic services. So the indicator, the first one that we have, it's really around the number of births registered within 30 days. The estimated performance for the previous financial year was at 700,000. We've again, for this financial year, committed to 700,000. And then the rest is really the 3-year target. In the following year, we hope we'll be able to increase by another 10,000. And then in 2023-24, we'll have another additional 10,000 as well. If we can move to the next one. This slide, the chair, provides the output indicator in terms of the quarterly performance breakdown. So I've said in the previous slide that the commitment for this financial year is to ensure that we register at least 700,000 births within a period of 30 days. It does not mean, Chair, that any birth that's registered outside that period, it won't be registered. It will be registered, but we want to ensure that there's compliance to the law in terms of registering a birth within 30 days. For quarter one, we're targeting about 177,980. For quarter two, 178,598. Quarter three, 168,424. And then in the last quarter, 175,000. So, Chair, we've indicated earlier in the introductory slide that the COVID-19 has forced us to take a scenario-based approach. Now, if we're 100% fully functional, we believe that in quarter one, we should be striving for this target, 177,980. And then in quarter two, same as stated above, quarter three, same, quarter four, the same. However, if the COVID-19 regulations are amended and we operate at 75%, we will then reduce the target to 500,000, and therefore the rest is the spread of the targets for quarter one, quarter two, quarter three, and quarter four. If we're operating at 50%, we will therefore have to reduce the target to 350,000, and the breakdown for the 4 quarters is listed on the slide. If we're operating at 33.3%, we'll then reduce that target to 233,000, and therefore the quarterly targets, the breakdown is also provided in terms of per quarter. However, under level 5, we believe that no service will be rendered. It will not be applicable because health in the previous slides, as indicated, also closed us out from some of the health facilities due to the fear of spreading the COVID-19 pandemic. If we can move to the next one. On the next one, on this number of smart ID cards issued to citizens, and this includes Chair, those that are naturalized and holders of permanent residence permit, and of course, mainly for 16 years of age and above. The annual target is 1,600,000 for 2021-2022. And then for the following year, we'll add an additional 300,000. And then for 2023-24, it will be 2.5 million that we'll strive for. If we can move to the next one. And then again, as indicated, this is the target for this financial year, 1.6 million smart cards issued to citizens. For quarter one, Chair, we'll strive to ensure that we achieve 416,000, quarter two, 400,000, quarter three, 368,000, and then quarter four again for 1,600,000. Again, if we take the scenario-based approach, if we're operating at 100%, the target remains as I've just stated. However, if we operate at 75%, we'll therefore move that target to 1.2 million. If we are at 50%, we'll be able to achieve half of that target. And if we are at 33.3%, 532,800,000. And therefore, level 2 to 5 for no services will therefore be rendered with regards to this target. Next slide. And then on the passports, the percentage of machine-readable adult passports on the new life capture system issued within 13 working days of applications collected. We believe that for this financial year, we should be able to attain 90%. Similarly, the following year and also the following year, 2023-24. And then for quarter one, quarter two, quarter three, quarter four, we want to strive for 90% across. If we can move to the next one. So this is the breakdown of the targets, if we are at level 5, it won't be applicable. Level 4, not applicable. And if we are at level 3, we believe that we will be able to process 90% of passports and issue them within 42 working days. If we are at level 2, we will be able to issue 90% of those passports. However, we'll only be able to issue them within 32 working days. If we are at level 1, similarly, 90% of machine readable passports. However, we'll be able to issue them as we are now within 13 working days. We can move to the next one. On the submission of the marriage bill to Parliament for approval this year, we're targeting to ensure that the marriage policy is submitted to Cabinet for approval. And then for Q1, we will be hosting a colloquium on the marriage policy with key stakeholders that will include religious groups, cultural groups, and the gender interest groups. And then in Q2, we hope, Chair, we would have incorporated all the public comments that will come from the colloquium and also the public consultation process submitted to Minister for approval. What is also key in this quarter is to ensure that we finalize the socio-economic impact assessment study report and also submit that to the DPME for approval. In Q3, we hope to submit the draft policy to the JCPS and also social clusters for recommendation to Cabinet. And we believe that in Q4, we should be able to have a final draft of the marriage policy submitted to Cabinet for approval. If we can move to the next slide. So we're now moving to another critical area on immigration. We can move to next one. So we believe that for this financial year, we will be able to conduct law enforcement operations or inspections to ensure compliance to immigration legislation, and it's 220 of this. And similarly, we will want to maintain the same target based on the baseline information in the 2022-23 and also in the 2023-24 financial year. The key focus areas that we want to focus on, Chairperson, in terms of our inspections, will be, amongst others, your retail outlets, your chain stores, your mines, hotels. We are part of the roadblocks and operations that are happening, whether it's in Tshwane, in Gauteng, in the Western Cape, in KZN, but also want to target spaza shops, general dealers, education establishment, and cell phone shops, security companies, transport and logistics, automotive industry, and of course, health practitioners, saloons, and so on and so forth. So that's what the focus will be in terms of ensuring that we conduct this inspectorate around this. If we can move to the next slide. So again, if we take the scenario-based approach, or before the scenario-based approach, the breakdown of the targets is as follows. The annual target is 220. For Q1, we've put a target of 55, Q2, 55, Q3, 55, and also Q4, 55. And if we take that scenario-based approach between level 5 and level 4 of the regulations, no inspections, and then under level 3, we'll reduce that to 110, which is half of the annual target. And then under level 2, we'll go back to 220, and under level 1, we'll go back to 220. And we do this exercise as we work with other partners in the province and also local authorities. This will include your metropolis and provincial SAPS. If you can move to the next slide. And then on the percentage of permanent residence applications adjudicated within 8 months for applications collected within the Republic, we are of the view that we should be able to strive for about 85% for the next 3 years. We can move to the next one. And then the scenario or the quarterly breakdown of the target is as follows. For Q1, because there were no reports to be submitted due to no population of applications. Similarly with Q2, similarly with Q3, and then in Q4, we believe that we should strive for 85%. If we can move to the next one. And then on the percentage of critical skills adjudicated within 4 weeks for applications that are processed within the Republic, our annual target is 85%, and then we increase that in the following year to 95%, and in the 2023-24 year, we increase that to 95%. And that's the breakdown of the targets per quarter. We will strive for 85% across. And then the percentage of business and general work visas adjudicated within 8 weeks for applications. Again, these are processed within the Republic. The annual target, it's 90%. And of course, for the next 3 years, we believe we should strive for 90%. If we can move to the next one. And that's the breakdown per quarter. We also believe we'll strive for 90% for quarter 1 up to quarter 4. If we can move to the next one. We're now on the Border Management Authority. I'll just give a flavor, and when the BMA Commissioner comes through towards the end, he will then provide a detailed breakdown. And here, for the 2021-22 financial year, we'll want to ensure that the BMA is incrementally established. We want to roll out the BMA at 11 ports of entry by incorporating, in particular, frontline immigration, port health, border facility management, and agricultural functions into the BMA. The third thing that we want to do is to roll out the BMA in phases along 5 segments of the land border law enforcement area, including between the Republic of South Africa and Zimbabwe, in Emanguzi, Skukuza, KZN and Eswatini, Mpumalanga and Eswatini. And lastly, is to ensure that we roll out the BMA to 1 community crossing points. And we've also identified the 11 ports of entry for 2021-22 include Byte Bridge, Maseru Bridge, Fixback, Oshuk, Kopfontein, Libombo, Groblersblach, Fuels Drift, Ramatlabama, Nakop, and Krasha's Neck. If we can move to the next slide. There's the BMA target, the number of ports of entry land border law enforcement area segments and community crossing points with incremental BMA rollout. In quarter 1, we believe we will be able to ensure the implementation protocol with SARS is concluded. We also believe that we will also ensure that we finalize the appointment of the 10 port coordinators to coordinate border operations in the BMA. In quarter 2, Chair, we want to conclude the implementation protocol with the South African Police Service. And then in quarter 2, the transfer of functions according to section 97 of the Constitution. And then in quarter 3, it will be the implementation protocol with defense that we hope to conclude. If we can move to the next slide. And for the BMA, incrementally rolled out at 11 ports of entry by incorporating frontline immigration, port and border management. For quarter 1, we'll want to ensure that the draft plan for the incremental rollout of the BMA border guards to ports of entry segments and community crossing point is submitted to the Minister for consideration. And in quarter 2, we'll want to ensure that that's also approved by the Minister. In quarter 3, incremental rollout at 11 ports of entry. And of course, that includes incorporating of the frontline immigration, port health and agricultural functions into the BMA. And that target is not applicable in quarter 4. If we can move to the next one. And here the target is the rollout of the BMA in phases along the 5 segments. We've said in quarter 1, it's not applicable. In quarter 2, it's not applicable. And then in quarter 3, we'll want to strive to ensure that the BMA is incrementally rolled out along 2 segments of the land border law enforcement area. And then in quarter 4, the BMA incrementally rolled out along the 3 segments of the land border law enforcement area. And also the BMA rolled out at 1 community crossing point. If you can move to the next one. Then on the National Targeting Center, as per the NTC establishment plan For this financial year, we'll want to ensure that the NTC is incrementally established, commencing with the establishment of an interim national targeting center, and that's throughout the next 3 years in a phased approach. For Q1, what we want to do, Chair, is to ensure that those protocols that I've referred to are negotiated, in particular with SARS, SNDF, and SAPS. We believe that in Q1, we should have a proposed interim NTC management structure submitted to EXCO for approval. In Q2, the proposed interim NTC operating model should be submitted to EXCO for approval. In Q3, the proposed interim NTC targeting priorities submitted to EXCO for approval. And in Q4, we believe that we'll have terms of reference for the preparation of an NTC blueprint and roadmap developed and approved by the acting commissioner. If we can move to the next slide. The next slide speaks to the development of the 6 land ports of entry as a one-stop border post. For this financial year, we'll want to ensure that we finalize the contractual and finances with the appointment of the bidders with respect to the redevelopment of the 6 priority land ports of entry. And similarly, in Q4, we'll want to strive for that. If we can move to the next one. On the one-stop border post for Q1, we want to ensure that we take the OSBP policy that we want to submit it to Cabinet by the end of the year. We want to ensure that there's consultation with NEDLAC. We have already started those consultations. They have set up a task team to look at the policy. That's what we want to do in Q1. And then in Q2, we want to take the draft OSBP policy, incorporating public and NEDLAC comments by submitting to the Minister for approval, including the final CS report submitted to the DPME for approval. And then in Q3, we'll want to ensure that the OSBP policy submitted to the JCPS and the ICTS and ESET cluster for recommendation to Cabinet. And then in Q4, we'll want to ensure that the final OSBP policy is submitted to Cabinet for approval. If we can move to the next slide. I'm now moving to information services. And for this financial year in particular, the branch has committed that they'll want to ensure that at a number of selected ports of entry, we then implement the biometric movement control system, or the BMCS. And for Q1, they'll want to ensure that the service provider is contracted to undertake this work. And in Q2, it will be the procurement of IT equipment is finalized. As indicated, the target is 23. In Q3, we believe we'll be able to finalize the 13 for Q3, and then in Q4, the last 10. And the 23 ports that are identified are listed below, Chair. We can move to the next slide. And then on the e-visa, for the 2021-22 financial year, we'll want to ensure that the e-visa phase 2 model is developed into a live capture and deployed in a quality assurance environment, in particular for temporary residence visas, critical skills visa, and permanent residence visas. And then the last area will be the general work visas, section 26A, section 27B, and C. And then that's what we intend to do in the next 3 years. We'll then add the PR and the permanent residence permit as well in 2023-24. If we can move to the next slide. That's the annual target for this financial year. For Q1, there's no target that's due. For Q2, we'll want to undertake a business requirement specifications for e-visa phase 2. And that we believe should be approved by the DDG Immigration Services. In Q3, we'll want to ensure that the technical specifications for e-visa phase 2, that's approved by DDG-IS. And in Q4, we'll want to ensure that the e-visa phase 2 is developed into quality assurance environment as a prototype. If we can move to the next slide. And then on the asylum seeker and the refugee system, that we want to develop. That's the annual target for this financial year. We want to develop that prototype, and again, in the 2022nd, 2023 year, we want to pilot, and then in 2023-24, want to implement. If we can move to the next one. So for this year in particular, for quarter one, we don't have a target that's due on this target. In quarter two, we'll want to ensure that user requirements are approved again by DDG IMS. And then quarter three, technical specifications also approved. And then in quarter four, we believe we should be able to develop and implement that system into live capture as a prototype. If you can move to the next slide. So the next one, as we move towards the end, it's really around human resource development. If we can move to the next one. For human resource development, we'll want to ensure that we undertake 13 awareness sessions on gender-based violence and femicide, gender and disability mainstreamed. We want to do that in this financial year. And then next year, we want to conduct 14, and the following year, another 14. And the breakdown is then provided per quarters. For quarter one, we want to conduct 3. For quarter two, 3. Quarter four, 4 awareness sessions. And quarter four, we want to conduct 3 awareness sessions. If we can move to the next slide. In the office of the DG, there are 2 targets that are in the APP. The first one is to ensure that the DHA bill is submitted to Cabinet for approval. In quarter one, we want to ensure that that final draft of the DHA bill is submitted. We then go out for public consultations. And then quarter two, again, we then gazette for public consultations. Quarter three, we want to consult with the clusters on the revised bill, in particular the JCPS and the GCID cluster. And then in quarter four, we believe we should be able to submit the bill to Cabinet for approval and for introduction to Parliament. If we can move to the next one. The next one is really around communication. The annual target for this financial year is to ensure that we have a DHA communication strategy and implementation plan through 20 media engagements, 6 outreach engagements, and 3 campaigns. And then, of course, we can then move to the next slides in terms of the quarterly targets. For quarter one, we want to ensure that there's 5 media engagements, 2 outreach engagements, and 1 campaign. And similarly for quarter two, quarter three, and then in quarter four, it's just the 5 media engagements and 1 outreach engagement. Next is the institutional planning and support, or IPS. For IPS, the annual target is to ensure that, Chair, we are bringing together here the green paper on the management of citizenship, international migration, and refugee protection. As you are familiar with the fact that some of these challenges that we face when we go to court are as a result of an impact of the one on the other. And similarly, in the 2022-23 financial year, we want to ensure that the draft white paper on management of citizenship, international migration is submitted to Cabinet for approval. And in 2023-24, we want to ensure that that's submitted as well. If we can move to the quarterly targets on this one. For the first quarter, we'll want to ensure that we submit the draft green paper on the international migration and refugee to the Minister for approval. And then in quarter two, we want to ensure that the CS report is submitted to the DPME for approval. And then we also want to host an interdepartmental workshop with the GCPS and GCID departments to consider the draft green paper. And then in quarter three, we want to ensure that the second draft paper is also shared with the clusters for recommendation to Cabinet. And we hope to conclude this work by quarter four, Chairperson. If we can move to the next one. And then the next one is really around the official identity management policy, which we believe should be submitted to Cabinet for approval. In quarter one, we want to ensure that the final CS report is submitted to the DPME for approval. A lot of work has already happened in this area. And then in quarter two, we want to ensure that This policy is submitted to the GSID and ESET clusters for recommendation to cabinet. And then we hope by Q3, the cluster will then recommend its submission to cabinet. And then in Q4, we hope to get cabinet approval. If we can move to the next one. And then on the revised service delivery model in Q1, we'll want to ensure that the service provider for the development of the service delivery model is appointed. And in Q2, we want to consider the 4 dimensions of the service delivery model. We want to review and ensure that that's approved internally by DDG IPS. And in Q3, we want to strive to have 5 dimensions of that model, also reviewed by DDG IPS. Q4, we'll want to ensure that the service or revised service delivery model is approved by the minister. If we can move to the next slide. Again, here, the annual target for the access, the DHA access model implemented through the revised footprint optimization plan, user asset management. We'll want to ensure that that's submitted. This is crucial in terms of our footprint to the DP, W&I for submission to National Treasury. And then in the following year, we'll want to ensure that that access model is then implemented through a revised footprint optimization plan. In the 2023-24 year, we'll want to ensure there's a full implementation following submission to the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure and National Treasury. If we can move to the next one. So on the DHA access model implemented through the revised footprint for Q1, we'll want to ensure that the DHA footprint development strategy, which focuses on the infrastructure plan, is approved by the DG in line with the approved access model. And then in Q2, we'll want to strive to ensure that the user asset management plan is revised in line with the footprint development strategy. And then in Q3, we'll want to ensure that that user management plan developed in line with the DHA footprint is costed and approved internally by DDG IPS. And in Q4, we want to ensure that this is submitted to the minister for approval, but also submitted for the DPW&I for submission to National Treasury. If we can move to the next slide. On counter-corruption and security services, which is something that's quite important. For Q1, we'll want to ensure that there's one consolidated report on process evaluation that focuses on the 6 identified areas. For Q1, we'll want to ensure that we conduct an information gathering exercise on the BMA in the identified ports of entry, starting with OR Tambo, King Shaka, Lebombo, Maseru, and Cape Town International and Beitbridge. And then we'll want to ensure that there's a report on part 1 of the process evaluation, which will be signed off by DDG Counter-Corruption. And then in Q2, we'll want to ensure that that report is signed off by DDG Counter-Corruption on the process evaluation conducted on the BMA at OR Tambo and the King Shaka. This is part 2 of the process evaluation. And then in Q3, we'll want to ensure that that report is signed off, but it focuses now on Cape Town International and Lebombo border post. And then in Q4, the report is signed off by DDG Counter-Corruption on the process evaluation that's conducted on the BMA at Maseru and Beitbridge. So that constitutes part 4 of the process of evaluation. And then on the percentage of reported cases on fraud and corruption finalized within 90 days, the annual target is 50%, and for Q1 up to Q4, we want to strive for the same percentage. On the number of threat and risk assessments, or TRAs, conducted in accordance with the requirements of the Minimum Information Security Standards, MIS, and the Minimum Physical Security Standard, MPSS, the annual target is 40. So for the breakdown per quarter, it's 10. And then on the number of vetting files referred to State Security Agency or SSA for evaluation, the annual target is 300, and from Q1 to Q4, we want to strive for 75 per quarter. So these next slides will then speak to some of the issues that, Chair, you have said we needed to reflect on. So each province has the following 8 targets as part of their DHA formal reporting framework. Amongst others, they have to ensure that birth is registered within 30 days, smart card issued to citizens, 100% of detected employers in contravention of the Immigration Act charged, and then transgressors in contravention of the Immigration Act as well charged, 100% of direct deportations concluded within 30 calendar days, 100% of transfers to Lindela also concluded within 20 calendar days, and then 80% of detected fraudulent marriages and marriages of convenience cases finalized. And of course, they'll only be finalized following investigations and recommendations. We'll want to undertake that work within 60 days, and then 100% of valid invoices settled within 30 days of verification. So that's just a breakdown of the targets. Out of 8 annual targets, we were able to achieve 7 of those. The annual target that was not achieved dealt with 100% of valid invoices not settled within 30 days. We can move. I think I've spoken to this slide earlier on, Chair. This is just a breakdown of the month-to-month death registration. If you were to look at the trend between 2016 to 2021, the increase really as a result of COVID-19 regulations, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, has really been in the period, I'll say remarkably 2020. If you look at the December period, that's highlighted in red, 55,676. If you compare to the previous financial year, 38,620. However, in January this year, 2021, compared to January last year, we recorded the highest, 78,244. If you compare to the 36,803 the previous financial year. And of course, this is what I was saying earlier on, that our staff really worked hard in the provinces to make sure that everyone who required a death certificate had access to our offices, including the working arrangements that we had with the funeral undertakers. If we can move to the next one. So what then are some of the challenges that provinces are facing as requested by this committee? As we indicated in some of the slides, that the second wave that was experienced in the country with high numbers of infections in particular in 4 provinces, the Eastern Cape, KZN, Gauteng, and the Western Cape. And of course, these were then identified as hotspots. There were about 90 office closures in that period during the reporting period. Of course, this led to a total of 248 lost working days due to confirmed COVID-19 cases, which is a regulatory requirement. In certain offices, there were repeat closures because of the COVID-19 infections. And then in the same period, Chair, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Department of Health then closed us access that we used to have to health facilities. This meant that we could not register on time some of the births that were happening. And some of the health facilities at hospitals, which previously belonged to Home Affairs, were then converted into COVID-19 testing areas, which meant we did not have space at hospitals. And some wards did not allow Home Affairs staff on premises to enable us to register births. And then there was the closure of the maternity wards due to COVID-19 cases being detected. And then, of course, clients were also reluctant due to fear to visit some of our offices within 1 month of giving birth for fear of exposing their newly born babies to the rising infections in the same period. And this resulted in births being registered from 31 days and above. And then mothers were also, if the chair recalls, from some of the hospitals were discharged immediately after birth. And this led to a difficult race to trace some of the mothers and post-birth to convince them to come back to Home Affairs offices. But in certain instances, we were able to trace them. And then also to indicate that some frontline offices had to close between 2 to 3 times due to the COVID-19 infections. And then banks also had to, the prerogative to allow or not to allow clients due to COVID-19 regulations. And the booking system of the banks, whom we have a partnership with, was also blocked due to COVID-19 regulations. And therefore, no applications were collected. As a result, there were no documents to issue. And then there were also connectivity difficulties that we had with mobiles in certain rural areas. And therefore, those posed a challenge in terms of collection of sufficient applicants to issue. We can move to the next one. So in the same period, we lost quite a lot of hours due to downtime, about 24,186. This is mainly related to the challenges that we have with SITA, the State Information Agency. And as a result of that, we've had these challenges. And then we also had challenges around water outages in certain provinces, which resulted in them having less operating times to service lines. That's just a breakdown of the office closures. What is also important, Chair, to highlight is that almost all our offices now have been equipped with water tanks to mitigate that risk. Similarly, all the offices have now been provided or have installed generators so that we deal with issues around water outages and also electricity challenges. Next one. I think this is the impact. We've spoken to some of these challenges, in particular with regards to current vacancies. That's just the list of where we have staffing challenges. If we can move to the next one. So the impact of COVID-19 on service delivery per province, the number of offices that have been affected, for example, in the Eastern Cape, 2 offices, number of officials affected, about 25, and some were primary contracts and therefore had to stop coming to work out of a staff complement of about 628 days. And there's the combined number of days on your right. In the Free State, similarly, 2 offices, number of officials affected 20 out of a complement of 345. In Gauteng, 16 offices. Here in Gauteng, Chair, it's important to indicate that this number was the highest because we had a number of offices where there were repeat infections, and therefore those offices had to close more than one time. So that's why that number is quite high. Out of a total complement of 1,193. In KZN, 15, and then the number of officials affected 77, Limpopo 25, 252, the second highest after Gauteng. Mpumalanga, out of 11 offices, 131 officials affected. Northwest 9, and then 62 for the number of officials infected. And the Western Cape, I suppose, as indicated in the other slide, follows with 159 officials affected. Others, as we've indicated, as primary contacts at the 10 offices that are highlighted. So this is out of a total staff complement of 4,898. Almost half of our staff members have been affected, translated to about 1,869. And the total number of days is some 248. We can move to the number of... So we also thought, Chair, it's important that because we are at this select committee and there's representatives from various provinces, we highlight also some of the work that's going on in the provinces. This is some of the capital projects that we undertook. And if you look on your right, this is the East London office where we were receiving a lot of complaints about long queues. We've had, if you look at on the right, had to just rejig how the layout was in that office to ensure that there's adherence to COVID-19 regulations, that the office can now take more people to offload those from the streets, of course, within social distancing perimeters. If we can move to the next one, I'll fly some of the slides. And if you look at this, this is the current project that's working on the Home Affairs Office in Thohoyandou. And that project will cost us an estimate of about 42 million just to ensure that it's built into a much more modern office. If you can move to the next one. This is Taung. If you look on the left chair, you'll note the current office that's there and the current progress that we're making towards building a much more modernized office in Taung. at a cost of about 33 million rand. We hope we should be able to conclude this project by the 21st of September 2021. If you look at the next one, this is the old office before the construction started in Lusikisiki on your right. And what we've done to really ensure that we have built a much more modern office in Lusikisiki. This is operational at the moment, and it's a much more modern office. It's changed the landscape in Lusikisiki, of course, built at a cost of about 64 million rand. That office is fully functional as we speak. And the next one, it's the office that's currently being worked on in Mokopane in Limpopo. On your right, you will note the challenges with the current office and the work that has been done to date through the partnership with the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. And then for the next slides, Chair, allow me then to introduce the BMA Commissioner to take you through the overview of the Border Management Authority, Mr. Jean Ravele, through you, Chairperson. Thank you.
Please go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Deputy Minister, honorable members of the Select Committee, and colleagues. You can proceed to the next slide, please. This part of the presentation seeks to provide update on the rollout of the BMA project as we know it. As a way of background, I think this gives information that most of people know, that the Act came into operation as of the 1st of January through the presidential proclamation that brought into effect Chapter 3 of the Act, which is from Section 7 to Section 12. And this proclamation also provided for the President to appoint a commissioner and 2 deputies. And once this process is concluded, we'll be able to start with the rollout in terms of the Act. You can move to the next slide, please. Next slide, please. So the rollout of the BMA project is guided by the National Macro Organization of Government principles. This is something that happens at the presidency, which is meant to govern how government departments or new ministries are established or new agencies are formed. It also governs the movement of staff from one department to the next, as well as the realignment of the macro organizational structures. You can move to the next slide, please. So this is how the project team as a whole, or the project structure looks. There's work that's happening at the presidency now, where the minister in the presidency is in charge of the NMOG process. Like I said, the BMA rollout will be guided by the principles within NMOG. So our project team, from a BMA point of view, well, the governance structure, at the top, you've got the Interministerial Consultative Committee, which we are in a process of establishing at the moment, which will be made up of relevant ministers that have got interests in the running of the borders. And the committee below that is the Border Technical Committee, which is made up of heads of entities and DGs, and the commissioner for the BMA will be the chair of that committee. And we've got in the BMA now a project management office that will be charged with day-to-day progress and workings of the project office itself. And you've got what we call departmental project teams, which have got work streams underneath them: HR, finance, legal, and so on and so forth. Okay, next slide, please. You can move to the next slide, please. I've covered this in my introduction. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I want us to move to the project plan itself. This is the implementation plan as we have it at the moment. So the first outcome was the commencement of the Border Management Authority Act. I've spoken about this earlier, where the president has issued a proclamation for the establishment of the BMA, particularly bringing into effect Chapter 3 of the Act. And the performance measure here is the signed presidential proclamation in a government gazette. What I need to emphasize here is that Section 41 of the BMA Act empowers the president to, by proclamation, determine the different dates in respect of the commencement of the different provisions of the Act. So currently, we have this proclamation that the president has signed, and we are working on other proclamation that will give effect to the other section or chapters of the Act. There's another outcome is the appointment of the commissioner and 2 deputies. This process is currently underway, and we are going to be informed through a presidential minute. Date is yet to be confirmed, and the responsibility for this is in the main the presidency, and the Department of Home Affairs is just providing support. Next slide, please. The next outcome is the concluding of implementation protocols with the SAPS, SARS, and the SANDF. This happens in terms of Section 27(5) of the BMA Act. We have drafted implementation protocols which were shared with the 3 organs of state. We are currently in discussions with the SAPS and the SANDF. They've raised some technical issues that we are ironing out. We believe that we'll find each other, and by the 15th of June this year, we would have concluded these implementation protocols. We have received input from SARS. We have analyzed it. We agree with them. The only thing left is for us to sign the implementation protocol. The responsible department there is the Home Affairs Department, as well as the Office of the Chief State Law Advisor. The next outcome is the listing of the BMA as a national public entity in terms of Schedule 3 of the Public Finance Management Act. Section 44.1 or 4 subsection 1 of the Act establishes the BMA as a national public entity in terms of the PFMA. We have had 2 engagements with National Treasury on this, so that they share with us the process that we need to follow in listing the BMA as a national entity. We have got a meeting scheduled for this afternoon with National Treasury, our 3rd meeting, and we hope to conclude this by presidential proclamation on the 30th of June this year. Responsible department is Home Affairs and National Treasury. Next slide, please. The next outcome is the establishment of the Interministerial Advisory Committee, as well as the Border Technical Committee. These committees are very important. Without these committees, it will be very difficult to implement some of the things that we are trying to implement. So to ensure compliance with Section 27(6) of the Act, coordination with other ministers will happen through this committee, the Interministerial Consultative Committee. The minister is currently working with us in creating this committee. We have drafted a proclamation for his signature, and we hope that this will be concluded soon. And also Section 25 empowers the minister to establish the Border Technical Committee. This is a committee of DGs who will oversee the rollout of the BMA. So this, the performance indicator here will be a proclamation by the president. We're also looking at the 30th of June as a due date. Responsible is Home Affairs, the Chief State Law Advisor, as well as the presidency. The next outcome is on regulations. A total of 13 sets of regulations have been identified for completion. The first draft set of regulation has been crafted. We have been engaging with other organs of state that operate at the border to get their input. We have received some, but we are yet to receive substantive comments there too. We are, like I said, we're currently engaging with these organs of state. We also have to consult with NEDLEC once the drafts are completed, more especially on the regulations that deal with basic conditions of employment for people who will be moving from other entities into the BMA. We also need to consult Parliament through our portfolio committee to get their input, also obtain legal opinion from the Office of the Chief State Law Advisor, after which the Minister will approve the regulations for them to be gazetted. The performance indicator here is the Government Gazette. We're looking at the 15th of July as the due date. Responsible entities is the Chief State Law Advisor as well as Home Affairs Department. Next slide, please. There's the issue of transfer of administration of laws between ministers. This is also contained in the Act, where there are certain functions that should be transferred to the BMA. But before the functions are transferred, we should transfer those sections of the laws that are administered by other ministers into the Minister of Home Affairs. So what we have done now, we have sent a letter to Directors General in 2020 October informing them of this. This letter was met with some resistance from some key departments, which led to some reluctance in concluding the implementation protocols. We withdrew this letter in March this year and initiated discussions. The discussions are mainly with the SANDF and the SAPS, and we hope to arrive at an amicable solution soon. The performance indicator here is the proclamation by the President in terms of Section 97 of the Constitution, which deals with transfer of functions from one member of cabinet to the next. We're looking at the 15th of July as our due date. Responsible department is Home Affairs, Chief State Law Advisor, and the Presidency. There's also an issue around the delegation of functions, powers, and duties by the Minister to the Commissioner, which is provided for in Section 28 of the Act. So this process has not begun yet. However, we intend to initiate this process by mid-June. Performance indicator here is a Government Gazette, as well as implementation protocol in terms of the delegations. We're looking at the 15th of July. Responsible departments is the Public Service and Administration, Chief State Law Advisor, and the Presidency. Next slide, please. Collective agreements with organized labor. So before functions and people move from other departments to the BMA, we need to conclude some collective agreements with the unions in line with Section 37 regarding transfer of employees from organs of state to the BMA. We are working with our HR department in this regard, in line with the principle of people follow function. There's an issue also around recognition of trade unions for the purposes of the BMA. Our view here, or our position, is that the current unions that are operational in the Department of Home Affairs will move with their members as they moved across to the BMA. And we're also talking here about creation of a collective bargaining mechanism for the BMA. If it's a new entity outside of the public service, it would have to have its own collective bargaining forum. And we will be presenting the blueprint and the implementation plan to the Public Service Bargaining Coordinating Bargaining Council in June this year. Performance indicator on this is a signed collective agreement by all unions and the employer. The time frame is the 15th of July, and responsible department is Public Service and Administration, as well as Home Affairs. The next outcome is the ring fencing of staff, assets, systems, and resources. So prior to the transfer of staff, assets, and system, resources and liabilities. Then there needs to be a ring fencing of these elements, so that we are aware of what's moving across to the BMA, and there's some agreement by ministers when it comes to these items. The performance indicator here was saying there should be regular reports that get provided to the presidency on this. We're looking at the 30th of July as the due date. The responsible departments here is both the BMA, PMO, the PMO at the presidency, as well as the affected departments. Next slide, please. So the next outcome reflects on one thing, that the ministers have to agree with the outcome of the ring fencing exercise that I spoke about earlier. So the effect here, the performance indicator is through a joint submission or an implementation protocol concluded by ministers, agreeing that the staff, assets, liabilities, systems, and resources should move across to the BMA. We're looking here at the 15th of August this year as the time frame, and responsible department is the DHA and all affected departments. The next one is the transfer of functions between institutions in terms of Section 3, subsection 4B2 of the Public Service Act. So in this regard, extensive consultation were undertaken in 2019 and 2020. We have drafted the Section 97 Presidential Proclamation, which was presented to the minister, and he made some comments. Those comments were factored in. The draft Section 97 Proclamation seeks to transfer the port health function, the sanitary and phytosanitary function in agriculture, as well as the property and facilities management function, which is currently performed by Public Works at ports of entry. So the immigration function is going to be transferable by delegation of the minister. And here DGs and accounting officers, as well as minister, will be required to sign off on the final Section 97 Presidential Proclamation. The performance indicators here is the proclamation signed and gazetted, the submissions by the affected ministers to the Minister of Public Service and Administration for his determination. We're looking at the 30th of August as the due date, and the two responsible departments here is DPSA and the DHA. There's an issue of transfer of employees. Once all this has been agreed to and concluded, the next step will be to transfer employees that will be following the function that has moved to the BMA. They'll be transferred to the BMA. And that principle of people follow function is applicable. The due date is the 15th of September. The final outcome is about application to the National Treasury on transfer of functions, budget shifts, budget structure through the National Treasury process and an appropriation bill. Once the agreements are reached among ministers regarding transfer of functions, people, assets, and liabilities, National Treasury will have to, through an appropriation bill, transfer the budgets from the above-mentioned for the above-mentioned functions to the BMA. The performance indicator here is the estimate of national expenditure guidelines from National Treasury. We're looking at the 15th of September as the due date, and responsible department is all affected departments as well as the National Treasury. Next slide, please. So the main challenges that we have been experiencing, one is the general challenge of coordination, lack of cooperation and resistance by some organs of state. And we think the mitigating factor here would be the establishment of the Inter-Ministerial Consultative Committee, and as well as the Border Technical Committee as provided for in the Act. We are of the view that once these committees are established, things will start running smoothly. And the next risk that we identify was around the budget. The CFO will talk about the budget at large. to try and augment the little budget that we've got, we have made some written submissions to National Treasury and the Presidency for further allocation of funds through the Presidential Employment Stimulus for training and deployment of the Border Patrol. The select committee would find interesting is that our strategy here is that we want to employ young people from the border communities. Instead of recruiting people centrally and deploying them to the borders, if it's in Beitbridge, we'll go to Musina and try and get young graduates or people that have just matriculated. They'll go for a process of training and then they will be deployed within that area. This also strengthens the community liaison function of the BMA, in that the communities will start feeling that they own the border and they should make sure that there are no illegal crossings. Next slide, please. This slide is just about the key success factors that for this project to succeed, we'll need a lot of commitments from a number of people, from DGs to participate in that DG forum that we are establishing, and also for ministers to ensure that they when the interministerial advisory committee sits, all ministers are represented, and also the issue around change management in managing the movement of staff and all that. So and also ensuring that the implementation is aligned to budget shifts, budget structure, and the appropriation bill. I think that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. CFO, I think.
Thank you, Chairperson, and good morning to the committee. Sorry, DG.
No, I wanted to indicate you will take over the finance section, but probably just 2 slides or so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, DG. Chairperson, thank you. Chairperson, if I can ask that we move to the next slide on the background. Chairperson, the department has been historically underfunded. In this regard, we're not alone. I think everybody in the security cluster suffers the same fate. During the previous financial year, the 2020-21 financial year, our budget was cut with 562 million during the special adjustments budget. During the MTF process, we suffered another cut of 301 million rands. We also had to reprioritize funds from our baseline in 2021 for COVID. We initially started off with 20 mil, we ended up with 39 mil. Chairperson, we, as a result of us not being able to sell our products, we had to reduce our revenue projections. We reduced our revenue projections to 621 million rands. It's usually just over a billion or 1.2 billion. Chairperson, the relevance of revenue collection is important in respect of self-financing. Self-financing is a mechanism which National Treasury created for the department, in terms of which the department then collects revenue and is allowed to use that revenue to pay for the enabling documents, the passports, the IDs, the courier services, the cash and transit services, the bank costs related to the production of those enabling documents. Chairperson, the realization from National Treasury is that our budget is not sufficient, and therefore the self-financing mechanism was created. But the problem is we need to collect the revenue. If we can spend much more, but if we do not collect the revenue, Chairperson, then we will run into difficulties. Chairperson, our COE ceiling is being reduced over the MTF. DG has indicated it's 3 billion rands over the MTF. We are not in a position to fill vacancies as posts become vacant, and that's done in order to ensure that we stay within our COE ceilings. We are facing immense budget pressures in the current financial year and going forward as well, Chairperson, with those budget cuts in mind. Our baseline grows with 2.1% over the MTF, and we're starting off on a lower baseline, and I'll share the MTF allocation letter in the next slide. We, as the commissioner has pointed out, Chair, so we have reprioritized an additional 80 million rands from our baseline to the Border Guard initiative to make sure that that initiative gets off the ground. We also reprioritized 18 million in the current financial year for our digitization project, and another 10 million rands, 55, to the two ministerial committees appointed. It's the one on the electoral reforms, and the other one is on the issuance of permits. Chairperson, from a historic perspective, please note that we have created a new program 4 called Institutional Support and Transfers. And if I can ask the presenter just to move to the next slide, that's the MTF allocation. I'll explain this a bit better. Chairperson, if we then look at our MTF allocation letter, our budget for 2021-22 used to be 9.6 billion rands. It's been reduced with 969 million rands. Our baseline for 2021 as accordingly is now 8.6 billion rands, starting from 9.6 billion rands. You see that, Chair. If you look over the MTF, it then grow on the 8.6, and that's where the 2% growth comes in, Chair. It's not adequate. It's not sufficient. As I say, it takes us back to where we were in 2017-16, round about there. Chairperson, it's also important to note that on the of this 8.6 billion rands, 2.2 billion of that goes to the IEC and the Represented Political Parties Fund. So if I take the 2.2 from the 8.6, Chair, that leaves us with 6.4 billion rands for the department. Chairperson, clearly that's not adequate. Chairperson, the other important point on this slide is the COE ceiling. It's this amount of 3.468 billion rands. We allocate that full amount to our COE, current warm bodies, to make sure, and we try our best to stay within that allocation. If I can then ask that we move to the next slide, Chair, it's slide on page 102. This is a summary of the MTF over time. Chairperson, we have 4 programs. I said I would get back to the 4 programs. In the past, the IEC and Represented Political Parties Fund, as well as GPW and the Films and Publications Board before that, used to lie under Program 2, Citizen Affairs. That created the false perception, Chairperson, that Citizen Affairs has a huge budget, which we are in control of, which is not the case. So we are very thankful to National Treasury for allowing us the opportunity to create this program, Institutional Support and Transfers. Chairperson, it will also help us going forward with the BMA, because the BMA is now part of that program. So if we need to transfer money out to BMA, it will be done from that program and not from our core business, civics or immigration services. Administration, as you know, Chairperson, is just the overheads where we house most of our IT, as well as our property and facilities. That's a big expenditure items under Program 1, Administration. Chairperson, just to confirm, in on 2021, under current payments, compensation of employees, the amount allocated for compensation of employees is 3.468, which is equal to the COE ceiling in the previous slide. Chairperson, I'm not going to go, if I can ask the presenter just to move to Program 1. I'm not going to present Program 1. I'll spend a little bit of time on Program 2. Thank you. Chairperson, there's a line item there, a sub-program called Service Delivery to the Provinces. For 2021-22, the amount allocated is 2.024 billion rands. So of the most of the money in the program, civic services therefore goes to the provinces. Chairperson, I do have a breakdown of the provinces, the budget allocated to the provinces in a later slide, so I'll come back to that, but that's the figure I just would like to point out. The 2.024 billion rands that goes to the provinces as part of civic services. Chairperson, the next slide is just a breakdown of immigration services. From an immigration point of view, Chairperson, it's important to note that ports of entry The budget for ports of entry, the Bait Breaches and the Messina Lebombo border posts, the budget for those ports of entry is sitting under immigration and not in the provinces. So those budgets are centralized. Chairperson, then slide number 4 is the one that deals with the IEC, the Represented Political Parties Fund, and the border management. Chairperson, you'll see here that for 2021, the budget for the BMA is now 145. That includes the 145 mil. It includes the 80 mil, which the department has reprioritized from its own baseline for the Border Guard initiative. The next slide, Chairperson, then gives a breakdown of the provinces, and I think we should spend a little bit more time here. Chairperson, the allocations to the provinces is done on a historic expenditure basis, so we are moving towards a zero-based budgeting for the current financial year. That's one of the outcomes of a meeting we had the weekend past. If you look at the allocations per province, you will see that for most provinces, Chairperson, there's a slight reduction in the budget allocation. So Eastern Cape used to be 281 mil, it's now 269 mil. Free State used to be 155 in the previous financial year, and it's now 148 mil. So, Chairperson, this is part of a budget cuts that was implemented. So, unfortunately, we all had to take our share of the budget. Most of the cuts for the provinces are on the salaries and the salary increases, which National Treasury decided to remove from our budgets, Chair. So it's not so much operational money, even though there are also cuts on operations for the provinces. Chairperson, the figure that balances back to the slide on program 2 is the 2.024 billion rands for provinces. Chairperson, we can also provide you with the detailed breakdowns of these budgets between goods and services, contractual commitments, and that kind of thing, but it's a lot of detail. Chairperson, if you then allow me, I'm coming to the end. There's the impact of the budget cuts on compensation of employees, and I think we should just go through this quickly, Chairperson. We have raised this before. We do not have funded vacancies. Posts are unfunded as they become vacant. We have critical senior vacancy positions like the CIO post, Chair. We are far advanced in making an appointment. That's my understanding. There are critical areas that are undercapacitated, Chairperson. Legal services, policy and research, the Standing Committee on Refugees Affairs, the Refugees Appeals Board. Risk management consists of 2 people in the department. The inspectorate, the people that must make sure that our laws are applied. We are severely undercapacitated there. The provinces are struggling with front office support. And Chairperson, then the reality is that our service delivery demands, and especially in the provinces, have increased in the midst of reduced capacity. We have insufficient staff levels and management at frontline offices. Our segregation of duties principles are compromised if we do not have sufficient number of persons at the frontline offices, and especially the modernized offices. We also have the issue of long queues, extended waiting times to access services at offices, and the reputational damage to the department, Chair. We are being accused in some provinces of being a super spreader for COVID. Chairperson, all our major ports of entry are operational 24/7, 365 days per year. We do not have sufficient number of staff to provide for shifts, for sick leave, and the demands of peak time. The result is that people have to wait at these border posts. We use overtime, Chairperson, where we can, but our overtime is limited to the difference between the delay in filling a post or a post becoming vacant and then not being filled. So that's how we manage to pay some overtime, Chairperson, but we try to limit it, and we don't have the money for it. So we need to make sacrifices elsewhere in order to pay overtime. Chairperson, the last one was just an incentive from National Treasury, the early retirement incentive. That was not really successful. The uptake there was insignificant. I I think it's the second last slide, Chairperson. Goods and services. Chairperson, we have reprioritized internally as much as we can to make sure that the ministerial priorities and the APP targets are funded. If we further cut the budget for goods and services, we will place the achievement of these targets at risk as well. We have issues on contractual commitments, especially those with a forex component. If Rand continues to depreciate, Chairperson, we may not be able to manage those contracts or to honor those contracts. And those contracts are important from a national security perspective. We have issues with payments within 30 days. We are doing relatively well, Chairperson. We achieved 98%. So 98% of all our invoices are paid within 30 days. There were 241 invoices last year that were not paid within 30 days. It's not that they don't get paid, Chair, they just get paid after 30 days. But Chair, if you run out of money, then you struggle to survive. And that's what we're now in a survival mode. Chairperson, maintenance support, self-explanatory, tech refreshes are delayed, security services are underfunded. Our office accommodation, we have taken a position as a department to move from private leases to state-owned facilities. We have been successful in doing it for some offices, Chair. But if we look at our current budget, we will only be able to do a Lusiki office replacement perhaps every year, Chair, and we have 400 offices, so it may take us 400 years to get all our offices to the same level as Lusiki, and clearly that's not acceptable. Chairperson, the last slide is just the impact. We're saying it will be impossible for the department to stay within budget and the COE ceiling, especially if the wage negotiations do not go the way of the employer. We are not in a position to create and fund new posts or full vacancies, even as and when these become vacant. Our pressure on goods and services will increase, and we will give priority to ensure that staff stay safe by providing the necessary PPE equipment and in the same breath try and achieve our APP targets. Chairperson, our revenue projections are significantly lower than prior years, and that impacts on self-financing expenditure. We are looking at developing alternative revenue streams. But lastly, I would like to give a committee the assurance that we will do everything within our power to make sure our budget is managed in a responsible manner and in accordance with the PFMA. In this regard, Chairperson, I would like to say that we haven't had any unauthorized expenditure since 2010. So we also have no intention of incurring unauthorized expenditure. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you so much, CFO. So, Chairperson, we are recommending to the Select Committee on Security and Justice to note the presentation on the Home Affairs Annual Performance Plan for 2021-22, including the budget that the CFO has presented, including the provincial breakdown and the related requests from the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Deputy Minister, is there anything you would like to add?
No, nothing. I think we have really dealt and presented a very extensive presentation. Thank you.
Now then let me just take this opportunity as well to thank you, Deputy Minister, the Commissioner, DG and the CFO for the presentation. And also the fact that you comprehensively covered those areas that we requested additional information on. Honourable members, I know this presentation was quite lengthy, but I think it's also because we requested additional information. But the intention was that as a committee, given the nature of our committee and how pressed for time we tend to get, that we maximize on this engagement and try and get as much information as we could get from the department. And that this would even allow us to engage more constructively on the information that we receive. Having said that, I'm going to request then, honourable members, if you have any questions and or comments that you would like to make, If you can give me an indication with the raise your hand function. If you're unable to use that, you could just give me an indication now whether you have a question to ask. I'm noting the hand of Honorable Mtetwa. Are there any other honorable members? Honorable Dodobu, Honorable Bartlett, Honorable Fisser. Okay, I think we'll start, and as honorable members raise their hands, we'll note them. Honorable Nkusi. All right, can we then start with Honorable Mtetwa?
No, thanks, Chairperson. Good morning to the DM and the team and his team. DM, thanks for the very detailed reports that you are giving us. It helps us a lot. But I've got only one question, DM, especially to Jean, to say, what program do you have around those people who are living next to the borderline? We learn that others, especially students, some of them, they even attend school right across the countries. What plan do you have? And in other areas, there are even borders whereby they cross through using IDs, something like that, and they register to the defense force for them to cross over and to and from. Can we be briefed as to exactly how are you dealing with this situation, and going forward, how are we going to address it so that we make it to a legal process? Thank you very much. I would wait for the answer. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Mtetwa. Honorable Dodobu.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. I'm in a very awkward situation, and pardon me if I get interrupted now and then. Firstly, I want to appreciate the presentation. Even if it was long, I think it was empowering, a lot of information, and it is quite inspiring in the manner that the department is handling all the issues and challenges that are facing the department itself. Having said that, just some few issues. I really appreciate how the department is implementing the Border Management Act in a way that it is quite systematic and inspire confidence. And I just hope that whatever that is being said here in terms of the targets, the time frames, and all of that are getting implemented. I'm saying this because the legislative process itself has been very, very long, and everybody is looking forward to ensure that this particular process of border management is finalized, that the issues of illegal immigrants in our country is dealt with, and all other issues related to corruption and that different departments are working in silos. And for me, this needs to be given the necessary attention. Now, linked with that, my question would be, how has the department attended to the systemic issues which were raised leading towards the enactment of the Border Management Act? For example, there was a big problem in terms of SARS, which was very much reluctant to cede its functions, especially the custom and excess duty functions, to the whole question of the BMA. How has that matter been resolved? But secondly, linked to that, Honorable Chair, is the issue of the illegal immigrants. I can see that part of what the department intends to do is to ensure that they target the shops, they target the hotels where the illegal immigrants are. But the issue for me is Do they have the necessary capacity, especially in respect of the manpower, to attend to all those particular issues? Because as part of the process of the PMA, we were alerted that illegal immigrants in the country are too many as a result of the lack of the capacity on the part of Home Affairs and their immigration officials to can attend to all those particular issues. Do they say in precision now they have the necessary capacity to ensure that they target those? And I, as a person, will be looking at them in terms of performing my oversight function to check whether indeed they are able to attend to those particular issues and that they impact positively in respect of the question of the illegal immigrants. For me, that is quite important. Just last two issues quickly, Chair. We will be having local government elections in the next few months. Is the department, I don't see how the department is saying it is going to help the process to facilitate, for example, people who apply for IDs and that the facilitation thereof so that these people receive their identity documents on time. And I haven't heard them spelling out that this, in the light of the elections that are coming, this is what we will be doing to ensure that we roll out the issue of the identity document application, registration, and availability to the people. The last point, Chair, relates to the Marriage Act. I've seen that the government will be processing this particular matter. One of the contentious issues that we must talk about is the issue of what is called polyandry. Yes, where women will be entitled to marry more than one man or spouses, as it were. I'm raising this point with full appreciation of the fact that we need to respect gender equality and non-sexism in our country, but the fact that this is unprecedented. The question therefore is the department ready to unfold this, to engage the communities, to hear on their views in terms of this particular matter, so that at the end of the day, it doesn't really create problems for us as we unfold this? Because as I'm indicating, I see this as very, very much unprecedented, but because we embrace the issue of non-sexism in our land, gender representativity and gender equality, there's got to be done. But my question is, we need to take into consideration those sensitivities so that at the end of the day, we do not create unnecessary problems. As I said, Chair, I'm in a very awkward situation, and I apologize for that. But that as it may, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Dobu. Honorable Bartlett.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good morning to our colleagues. Sorry for not opening my video because I have a slight problem. But I just have a few questions, Chair. How many current vacancies exist within the department? What cost-saving measures are being put in place to ensure that service delivery is not compromised in light of the challenges related to the compensation to employees? And then my second question, Chair, please explain the high amounts for goods and services, particularly given our current economic climate. What measures are being put in place to reduce these budget items on slide 100? Then my third question, Chair, we know that the department mentioned on slide 109 that vehicles are not repaired as a budget for fleet hardly covers the running cost of fuel. But what mitigation measures have they put in place to address this to ensure the department services run smoothly? And then especially on a provincial basis, Chair. And then my last question, Chair, it refers to slide 66. With regard to cases on fraud and corruption finalized, can the department expand on the consequence management initiatives that are being taken, or will it be taken against corrupt employees? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Bartlett. Honorable Fisser.
Thank you, Chair. Good. Thank you for a very extensive presentation that we received. I just want to ask, has the department determined any of those Mozambican citizens that are legitimately fleeing from the conflict area of Cabo Delgado? How many are they, and how in this humanitarian crisis does the South African government assist in, and where do they? Further than that, I had recently inspected the border posts in the northwest. I just want to request: did the department replace the scanners at these border posts, especially where they use it to trace human trafficking, drugs, and other things? Because when we visited there, not one of those border post scanners were in a working condition. Thank you, Chair. That's my question.
Thank you, Honorable Officer. Honorable Nkosi.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Greetings to your good self, DM and his team, my colleagues, and all officials that are present from the Select Committee. Chair, thank you very much for the presentation made. It was really informative and well presented. We really want to accept the presentation and welcome it. Chair, I've got a few questions that I want to ask from the team of the DM. Question number one is that it's with regards to the service delivery. We read about many complaints related to long queues at Department of Home Affairs offices. On slide 108, what improvement measures are being put in place to remedy this situation in the short term and long term? What monitoring and evaluation mechanisms have been implemented to ensure that this is monitored and measured on a continuous basis? The other questions, it's related with slide 73. Slide 73 depicts the provincial resourcing of offices. Please provide more detail regarding the constraints and challenges, particularly in relation to staffing and service delivery in provinces. The other question I was covered by Honorable Dodovu with regards to the identity documents. I will then move to the other one, the question that I want to raise. The increased focus on technology will be central for the Department of Home Affairs going forward, as well as the need to speed up the modernization program. On slide 12, Chair, I want to request the department to provide us with more details on the measures that will be implemented to give effect to these, and as well as the budgetary implications. The other question that I want to raise, they've raised the issue of the problem in connection with the connectivity in rural areas. So I want to check, especially on slide 71, it talks about those challenges in provinces. I wanted to request the department to also indicate the connectivity difficulties of mobile units in certain rural areas posed as a challenge, because when they do the presentation, they posed that as a challenge. So I want to know from the department that how are they addressing the connectivity and service delivery issues, especially in the rural areas, Chair. My last question is that given to the civic services program deals with mainly direct service to the public in respect of the provision of birth certificate, smart identity documents, and passport, amongst others, what are the current challenges experienced by the department, particularly in light of COVID-19 restrictions, which may hamper the service delivery of these services? And what measures are being implemented to remedy the challenges? Thank you very much, Chairperson. I submit.
Thank you, Honorable Nkosi. Honorable Seleku, you are the last.
Thank you very much, Chair. Allow me to greet the DM and the DG and everybody that is here from the department, and also appreciate the work that has been done in actually preparing this presentation, which consists of more than 100 pages and which has a lot of information. But Chair, I won't be long, but firstly, I would just like to know in terms of the asylum application, how long does it take for the department to process such an application? And secondly, Chair, if you look in terms of the programs 1, 2, and 3, you'll find program 3, which in the 2019-20 financial year, they actually achieved all their targets. It was 100% performance, and it tells us that it's the only program that actually achieves its 100% targets. But Chair, why is it difficult, or why is it that when it comes to immigration, we still find that South Africans feel that the department is not doing enough? Why can't their performance in 2019-20 translate to to better understanding and perceptions about the department when it comes to dealing with immigration? And secondly, Chair, we must be very cautious when it comes to the reduction of targets and try to say because of COVID, we have reduced our targets in terms of the issuing of birth certificates within 30 days and the issuing of smart IDs. But if you look in terms of program 1 and 2 in 2019, they were not able to meet their targets. So what I would like to know to the department, what other factors did they take into consideration when they reduced the mentioned targets in terms of issuing of birth certificates and the issuing of smart IDs? Chair, my constituency is in Caledon, which is about 112 km from Cape Town. And it's a small area, and it's mostly Afrikaans, it's rural, and there's a lot of farms around it. But Chair, what is painful for me, it's always when I pass the Office of Home Affairs, I always see people lining there. I see long queues on a daily basis. And Chair, if it's hot, it's very hot. Then if it's cold, it's very cold. And this thing of long queues at DHS offices, it's not a thing that has been coming for the last 5 to 10 years. It has been there for years. And why is it so difficult for us as a country to deal with this elephant of long queues at these particular offices of Home Affairs? And when are we actually going to make sure that we defeat these long queues so that the people, when they go for these services, they don't have to be, exposed, to heat and to cold, especially old and the elderly? I just want the department to elaborate in terms of their plans going forward so us actually can deal with this issue of long queues. Chair, also what we also understood in terms of Home Affairs, we always hear sometimes when people would queue in a line, and then when they need to be assisted, and then they will go, and then they were told why they're still queuing there for let's say someone came there at 6 in the morning, and then you were waiting there, and then by 11 o'clock when you're about to be helped, and then an official will come out and say, unfortunately, we can't help you anymore because our system is offline. It's very sad when you find such things happening in this country in this day and age. How are they going to make sure that the issues that they have when it comes to their systems, that is dealt with and it does not compromise the people, because they have been waiting for years. Chair, when it comes to the BMA, this issue of the BMA, we have our own experiences when, presentations was done with us, when it comes to functions that falls in a particular department and then must be transferred to another department, and there is no agreement, and there seems to be fights. One would have thought that now that, this bill has been, agreed to, that some of us would not be finding or hearing that a commissioner will tell you that letters has been written to DGs about certain functions that need to be transferred to to the BMA, and then that letter, you don't get the response, and then they have to withdraw that letter so that they can engage, with these particular DGs. So, Chair, when such things happen with this BMA, what is the implication of such, things where DGs are still pulling ranks, someone, between, functions, not willing to give over the function so that we can actually see, this BMA being implemented to its full capacity. And if such things happen, Chair, can the commissioner just tell me that in terms of the time frame that were shared with us as members of the select committee, when we're dealing with this particular BMA, are they going to meet those time frames, or are we going to push the goal post to a later stage for us to actually see the full implementation of this particular BMA? I think, Chair, my last one would be on the issues of office rentals. If the CFO can just, share with us as the select committee, how much is DHA currently spending on office rentals, and what is the plan going forward of DHH having their own offices in our different provinces? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Seleku. And thank you, honorable members, for those questions. I think just from my side, certain observations and a couple of questions. Let me also join Honorable Dodovo, especially in terms of the information that was provided to the committee, especially around the Border Management Authority, as also in terms of the detailed plan that you provided to us. I think this is one piece of legislation that we also spent quite some time on, as Honorable Seleku has indicated. And I think when we did deal with this piece of legislation, we were very aware of the difficulties of movement of functions in the public service, etc. And I think we also expected some kind of resistance. As a result, I think we took extra effort to ensure that there are appropriate coordinating structures which are within the legislation, which should assist, with this process. But also, I think we also made certain things mandatory, especially in terms of functions with SARS, SAPS, and the Defense Force. But I think we should thank the department, especially for the detailed information they provided to us. But Deputy Minister, I just wanted to raise another issue related to the Beitbridge border post. As a committee, we did embark on oversight at the Beitbridge border, and there was some recommendations. I want to home into two that were made, especially around security issues and infrastructure issues in that area. And the one that related to the need for urgent installations of robots and boom gates at the port of entry. And this was to curb the forceful entry of vehicles. And what we had recommended at the time, Deputy Minister, was that the Department of Home Affairs actually engages the Department of Public Works regarding this installations. And perhaps if we could be provided with what has actually happened around that. The second issue was in relation to, at the border post, there was a taxi rank and a small business, a lot of small businesses that were located around the port of entry. And what we had recommended at the time as well was that the department engage the Department of COCTA, the MEC for COCTA in the province, as well as the Musina local municipality, to come and find some kind of lasting solution to this matter. And perhaps if we could also provide us with whether there's been progress on the matter and whether there have been any challenges around this issue. Chair, my other issue, Deputy Minister, my other issue is around the one-stop border posts. I see this target is quite a lengthy time frame attached to it, and we're looking at the construction still continuing in 2023-24. But maybe if you could give us an indication of what is the completion date for this project. And my final comment, Deputy Minister, is around the gender-based violence and femicide strategy being implemented. And I think we should also comment that the department for its inclusion of this target in its APP. But if you could maybe perhaps give us more information pertaining to this target, also in terms of capacity, resources, and methodology that you would use to give effect to this strategy. I think from my side, those are the questions and or comments. Deputy Minister, I can then hand over to yourself to then take us through the responses. Deputy Minister?
No, thank you very much. Can I just request that I call on about 4 members of the management team, probably start with Mr. Mavuso to deal with the IT-related issues, and then follow up with DDGHR to deal with the issue of staffing and cost to employees, and then Mr. Holombe to deal with finance-related issues, and the commissioner to deal with the BMA-related issues, then DG, then I will try and sum up if they can also just try and take their points quite quickly, but with your permission, Chair.
Please go ahead, Deputy Minister.
Yeah, members follow through in terms of that sequence. Thanks, Mr. Mavuso.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. I will respond to a few issues that have been raised in this meeting, starting with the question that was raised by Honorable Mteto on the borderline issues and children attending schools in South Africa. So a few years back, we did a borderline survey. One of the issues, obviously, that came out was that in majority of the borderlines, particularly between ourselves and Lesotho, Swaziland, and Botswana, there's a lot of communities who are same communities, but they're separated by the border. So one of the strategies that we employed, actually, we started in Botswana, in the Molopo area, where in a place called Sidila Mlomo, where we created what we call a community crossing point. So when the community in that area is registered, they've got cards to cross, they are not allowed to enter in each country over 50-kilometer radius. So that's one of the areas. In Lesotho, for an example, there was an issue about children attending school across the border whose passports get stamped every day, they get full. So there was also an arrangement around them being registered so that they don't get their passport stamps. So there are formal processes that the department has put in place in realization of the reality that we are faced with when it comes to the borderline communities. I mean, we've got the same problem in Manguzi, in the northern part of KZN, where we needed to also create a mechanism to allow those children to be able to attend school. So that's the first issue around the management of the children crossing for the purposes of education. Honorable Dodov raised an issue on marriage policy. I just want to indicate that we started in 2019 with a review of the marriage policy, because South Africa has 3 regimes of marriage policies. The marriage policy of 1961, which is based on Christian value system. Post 1994, we're faced with a lot of challenges once the constitution was passed around the constitutionality of some of the marriages, like customary marriage. That's why the legislation was therefore passed to deal with that. And then the Civil Union Act also came on board. So we have been challenged around the issue of equality because the Constitution promotes issues of equality. That is why now we have had to review the policy, because some of these things are taken to court of law. There are certain marriages that are also not, for an example, recognized in law. We've got Hindu and Muslim marriages that are concluded according to their culture, but they still have to register at Home Affairs for that marriage to be recognized. So part of the discussion we're having, it then broadens some of these issues. That's why the issue of polyandry, which obviously I see the media has picked up on that particular issue, but also not addressing some of the other marriages. So we're going to be having a huge campaign of stakeholder consultation, but also going to the media platforms to communicate some of the key aspects of this legislation. And then Honorable Fisher, I'll check the issue of the scanners. I'm not sure which border posts were those, so if I could maybe get the details, we can then talk about it. Honorable Nkosi, the issue of connectivity of mobile units in rural areas, we are working on that. So what we did with mobile units, we created we connected them with what we call an LTE router. LTE routers, are connecting to cell phone towers, which are static. Once you move away from the cell phone tower, that is strong in a highly populated area, you then struggle when you get to rural areas with connectivity, the bandwidth, the latency. So one of the resolutions we took was to say that over and above the LTE routers in the mobile trucks, we need to have what we call a VSAT, which is a satellite connectivity. Because with satellite connectivity, it covers the entire length and breadth of the country. We tested that unit last year, but unfortunately it was a borrowed unit for the purposes of testing. We then tried to purchase our own unit to be able to continue stress testing before we buy it in bulk, because our plan is that mobile units must have two types of connectivity, an LTE router and also the VSAT, so that you create redundancy, so that there's no place where we're saying the mobile unit cannot connect. So then we tried to purchase outright that particular unit. Unfortunately, we needed to get permission from SETA because that's mandatory services of SETA. SETA says to us, look, we can't give you that permission. Let's get to Treasury. Treasury then approved about 2 weeks ago. So we are now in the process of finalizing to test that VSAT flat panel for us to be able to ensure that we connect rural areas. I must emphasize the point that even telecommunications companies, they are very biased towards the infrastructure investment when it comes to rural areas. They are focusing on urban areas where they're able to generate profit. Rural areas suffer as a consequence because they don't see them getting a return on investment. But it's something that as a country we need to be able to look into. How do we actually force rural areas to also be upgraded? And then the current challenges faced by civics and service, maybe I think the DG might deal with that. But I just want to touch on the reality, Honorable Nkosi, is that one of the biggest challenges I think DG mentioned in his presentation, you've had to close an office because there's a case. You have got to ensure that certain staff members are available, because people will tell you that they've got symptoms, they've got this and this. So you then cannot force that person to come to an office. These are some of the issues that are a problem. And then maybe just to assist in the absence of Mr. McKay, on Honorable Seleku around the asylum seeker application. Honorable Seleku, someone who lodges an asylum seeker application in the refugee reception office gets an asylum seeker permit on the day that they lodge the application. What takes long is the determination whether his application actually qualifies him for a refugee status, because you need to be able to look at the reasons in which the person says they have been persecuted for. So in the main, you'd find that the refugee status determination officer is able to finalize that within a week or so and say this matter is unfounded, is abusive. Then once the person gets the response, then they take the matter to the Refugee Appeals Board, which is called now RASA, the Refugee Appeals Authority of South Africa. So they take that for appeal. So this is where most of the cases that have been clogged for many years, so this is one of the challenges that we are faced with. On the issue whether citizens feel that immigration is not doing well, there are four categories that immigration is operating in. The first one, obviously, is the category where they issue visas and permits. The second category is the inspectorate, where they are able to ensure that they enforce the legislation in terms of complying with immigration. And then obviously the third component is the one that we've just talked about on immigration services. And then obviously the issues also relating to deportation. So the capacity, as we have said in the past, I mean, inspectorate in the entire country has less than 700 officials who are able to must do two functions. One, look at people who are actually in the country illegally violating our immigration laws, staying illegally without permits. Then the second part is to assist the permitting unit that before they adjudicate on a particular matter, they can visit. Let's say someone is applying for a permanent residence on the basis of a marriage. So inspectorate has a duty to go and be able to validate whether that marriage is not a marriage of convenience, and then give the immigration officials, that particular statement. So I thought I should just mention that these are some of the limitations if you look at the constraints that we have. The issue around systems queues being cut and system being offline, I will be the first to acknowledge that we have had situations where we've got system outages, where in some instances we fix, but also we have seen some managers who are naughty and cut queues even though system is working, because they're making a determination that by 3 o'clock I will only be able to serve those people in the queue. The reason why we have so many queues in the Department of Home Affairs, I think the problem is twofold. One is that we don't have adequate footprint infrastructure for the kind of country that we are serving. But secondly, is the type of infrastructure we have, where people are queuing outside instead of going inside the building so that they can be serviced. I mean, if you look at an office like Randburg office is arranged in a campus layout where from the street, you're not even able to see that there are queues in there because everybody goes in. Barrack Street in Cape Town is a similar. You only see queues in the morning, but then when you engage public works about needs assessment, you then have a problem with the public works that will give you an office that they conclude the bid, they issue the spec, they conclude the bid for an office that does not even have parking. I mean, our Pretoria office, which is Baron, is one such example, which is an ISO, and create an impression that the Department of Home Affairs doesn't care. But because we want infrastructure that will be able to bring people inside. That's why the DG says and the CFO to say we need to move to a different type of infrastructure. That is why our wish is to be able to manage our property portfolio so that we can be able to choose the kind of infrastructure, because when these things happen, it impacts on us. The negative reputation and brand damage is the brand damage on the Department of Home Affairs, not on public works. So because they are invisible in the eyes of the public, the legislation that have been created by Parliament, sometimes they hamstring departments and not able to fulfill their obligations. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you. Maybe let us take Mr. Holompe and then DJ. I think some have also covered some of the issues.
Thank you, DM, and thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I will deal with the two issues on cost. The first one is the cost-saving measures. Chairperson, we have tried everything and anything, and we'll still try some more. The cost-saving measures we introduced last year was to limit travel and accommodation, and COVID contributed assisted us in that regard. The other one was we said no use of outside venues. We renegotiated our cell phone contracts. We renegotiated some of our Forex contracts. So those are the cost containment measures which we apply. Chairperson, our budget for goods and services is 2.613 billion for the current financial year. That sounds as though it's a lot of money. It's frankly, Chair, it's not, because if you take off the private leases, which is a question from I think, Honorable Sileku, it's 500 more. Private leases alone is 500 more. IT on the modernization contracts, that is 644 million rands on its own. So if I take those two contracts out, to Chairperson, if I call them contracts, then we're sitting with 1.63 billion rands to run an operation, which requires us to be open 24/7, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day at all ports, at the major ports of entry, and to operate 400 offices countrywide with mobile services and make sure that everything happens. So, Chairperson, my submission is that our budget is really not adequate, and it will take some time for us to get to a position where we can say we are adequately funded. And I don't think it's going to be in this MTF. Chairperson, I think those are my questions. So I think Mr. Mavuso did deal with the issue. Our strategy on private leases is to move from private leases to state-owned, purpose-built facilities, like on a campus-like settings, such as Randburg is a good example. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Okay, thank you. I think I forgot DT Jim Hobogo on the issue of human resources and staffing. Then DG, then I'll just sum up, Chair, through you.
Okay, thank you very much, Deputy Minister, and good morning to the Chairperson and honorable members. Good morning also to the Director General and my fellow colleagues. Honorable Faisal asked the question about the staffing issues and the challenges. And I just want to build on the story that the CFO has just presented about the historical underfunding of the department that therefore has a negative spin-off on the staffing, in the sense that we know how much staff we require. We have done all sorts of benchmarks and exercises to come to the point where we have a structure that is approved, but that structure has historically been underfunded, and we have all the years been operating at about 50% capacity of what we should have had in the first place. And that was the previous years prior to the economic meltdown and prior to COVID. Now, with things taking a downward spiral, Chairperson, we have since continued to lose a whole lot of other staff members due to natural attrition. People that are reaching 65 have gone on retirement, and people that have also applied for early retirement have also taken leave and went home. And we also see other people that are looking for other developmental opportunities, also resigning, going for promotional opportunities elsewhere. And so if, for instance, in 2014, we had a staff complement of about 10,000, we are now sitting at 8,493, which shows that our inability to continue to fill the positions that become vacant, in a nutshell, shows that we are continuing to shrink. And the reason that we are unable to fill the positions is because there is no adequate COE budget that will allow us to procure or to attract staff from the market into the department. So in a nutshell, what it means, Chairperson, unfortunately, it means that as and when people leave, we have more people that are inside the department that now have to assume more responsibilities. You find that one or two people one person has to do a job of more than two people, and it puts a strain on them, and as well as provides all sorts of challenges, including possibilities for corruption, because then we can segregate functions. So in a nutshell, we are aware as HR, we do exercises, we do benchmarks, we do productivity measurement, and we can see that we are not optimally capacitated. We have then since tried to augment ways of capacitating the department, even if we are not able to fill. Firstly, let me hasten to say that EXCO had a discussion on this matter and decided to say, even if we are so critical, however, we'll still prioritize filling of very critical positions that were identified to make sure that at least these we can be able to salvage and fill. And so the 53 identified positions were then advertised, and they are at different stages of filling. At this point, we have filled almost 95% of those. The only ones that are remaining, we are still in the process of recruitment, and we hope that by the end of this quarter, we would have at least closed on the entire list of the ones that have been identified. But also to say that the front offices in the different provinces are also experiencing a lot of challenges in that because of the natural attrition and the inability to fill posts, then it means they still have to serve the same communities, number of communities, and they are getting thinner and thinner. And so we are trying to see internally how we can reorganize ourselves through the review of the structure as well as the continual analysis of the skills inside to see which resources we can then redistribute to areas of need based on the operational requirements of the organization. And so this is an ongoing process that EXCO is also monitoring. Going forward, we hope that we will still remain within the compensation of employees ceiling, because failure to do that would then mean that we are overspending on the COE. However, the continued efforts of training and retraining and remobilizing staff is meant then to fill the gap where necessary, and we will continue to engage also the DPSA where we can really seriously motivate for the ability to fill more staff. I'd like to leave it there, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
DG.
Thank you so much, Deputy Minister, Honorable Chair. Let me start with just the leftover questions. Honorable Dodovu, on the inspections, whether we do have capacity. The reality is we don't have adequate capacity, and we rely on working with others such as the South African Police Services. In Gauteng, working with the SAPS as part of their operation Ukai Mulao. And then in Tshwane, working with Metropolis, in Joburg, working with Metropolis, in Cape Town, it's the same, just to compensate for some of the challenges that we have. I think the important point to make here, Chair and the Deputy Minister, is that the entire security cluster, as DDGHR was saying, it's currently underfunded. If you go to the SANDF, it's similar challenges. You go to the SAPS, similar challenges. Correctional services, similar challenges. So you then need a whole of government approach towards some of these issues. The second question, Honorable Dodovu asked, is around our state of preparedness for local government elections. We have started, Honorable Dodovu, with communication awareness. And of course, we're working with our counterparts from the IEC. The Deputy Minister has already started with his campaign in Northern KZN to encourage, in particular, to encourage young people to ensure that they've got IDs, those that are of voting age. Similarly, this weekend, we are in El Dorado Park in Johannesburg to encourage communities to register for elections. Our mobiles, there's a program for the mobile vans that we have shared with the Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs, which we can also share with this committee, just to indicate where the mobile vans are. And maybe just to add one point on the marriage policy, Honorable Dodovu, as DDG Mavuso was indicating, is that the current legislation that regulates marriages in South Africa, as he was saying, it's not informed by an overarching policy that is based on constitutional values. And it's quite interesting that the media picks up just on one issue, because if you look at that option that's presented as part of the marriages, option one is to ensure that there's inclusive customary and religious marriages, which takes into consideration constitutional principles of equality and non-discrimination. The new legislation also must cater for all polygamous marriage, irrespective of race, nationality, culture, and religion. The second option then speaks to gender-neutral polygamous marriage. And this option, of course, accommodates, Honorable Dodovu, both what is known as polygyny, where a man takes 2 or more wives, and polyandry, a woman who takes 2 or more husbands. And these are inputs that we've been receiving from the consultative processes. Honorable Fessor, on the issue of Cabo Delgado, Home Affairs is part of the net joints, which is looking at the entire security situation, and not only in Mozambique, but also throughout the country, and to ensure our state of readiness. At the moment, there's no data to indicate any migratory movements that have increased from the north of Mozambique. We also work with the UNHCR, and from the work that they are doing in Mozambique, the indication at the moment is that they are working more towards ensuring that they provide shelters in Mozambique rather than to allow people to move southwards. So at the moment, there's currently no data around that. And the last two, Honorable Nkosi, on the long queues, we also working with the banks, the DDG Mavuso, in terms of how they can provide assistance as a site where you can go and also apply for some of the services that we are rendering. I think it's important to also indicate that this committee that almost all the 4 banks are now, the 4 big ones, are willing to enter into MOUs with us. We have a meeting planned with them tomorrow, including new banks such as Discovery, Capitec, so that we start moving towards ensuring that some people can also apply for some of these products at Home Affairs offices. And then the last one is really on the question that Honorable Sileku asked around asylum applications. DDG Mavuso has already responded to that, but it's also important here to indicate that currently we have a partnership with the United Nations High Commission for Refugees to the tune of about 147 million, aimed at addressing the backlogs that DDG Mavuso spoke about 153. And as indicated, the backlog to be cleared will take a bit of time, but over the last few weeks, we have been interviewing. As part of that agreement, we need to employ about 36 lawyers. We have conducted those interviews to bring them on board to assist us with the backlog that has been referred to. Just the last one, Honorable Sheikh, on the Boyd Bridge border post. I think on the OSBP, it's a phased approach in terms of the construction. We have now registered this project as part of the presidential infrastructure project, looking at the 6 ports of entry. And the presidential infrastructure project will be taking a phased approach in terms of implementation. And they've already started a lot of work working with our commissioner on the BMA with regards to that. Of course, they will be issuing a request for proposals in the next few weeks. The challenge was that, Honorable Sheikh, of the companies that had been previously shortlisted, some of them collapsed in the process. We do know that companies such as Group 5 have ceased to exist. So we had to restart that process. But we believe that we're on course to meet the targets that we've set for ourselves. Thank you, DM, and I then hand back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. On the few issues that are remaining, I think the issue of reduction of budgets, as we had indicated before, that it becomes a very scientific exercise. And it's not just because there was COVID, but COVID resulted into our budget having to be cut. And as a result, we had to review on what we can do with the available resources, considering that priority had been placed on COVID-related issues. And this is processed also and approved by the DPME. So our targets are really a thought-through process. On the issue of Boyd Bridge border post and security, we have forged alliances with the South African National Defence Force, particularly on the busy days. Our focus has been really on the mending of the borderline, and it has really shown some improvement with us working together, because the SANDF now no longer needs to take people through a long route of processing. They will have our officials immediately, then we can process and deport them immediately so that they go back to their own countries. I'm happy that the DG mentioned the project that we're having with the UNHCR, which is what we have launched, I think, about a month or two ago, which will really give us capacity to deal with the backlog around the issue of asylum seeker application. And we really value the importance of the partnership that we have with UNHCR. On the issue of fraud and corruption, we are continuing to beef up our counter-corruption unit. As you know, that it has been recently established. Now we have almost just about to fill up the post of the DDG. So moving forward, you will be getting reports clearly, even at this particular level. The principle that we have when it comes to our new marriage law regime is that the rights of another must not trample on the beliefs of anybody else, which means we will be open as much as possible. We will support and respect everyone's right and make sure that the process is equitable. And we have gone through a very extensive way of consultation. So we hope the process at the end will be a reflection of a diverse society that is united in what it seeks to achieve. So I think we have really dealt with most of the issues. I'm not going to take any more of your time, Chairperson. If members feel there are questions that we did not answer, we will gladly respond to them in writing. But thank you very much for the opportunity to come and present and to answer the questions.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister and the team, for all your responses. And I think you have largely covered most of the questions. I just want an indication from members if you have any follow-up question, please indicate so. Okay, I'm not seeing. Okay, I'm not seeing any indication. But then let me just thank you, Deputy Minister. But also to indicate to you that your presence and support to the committee is always appreciated. I know we don't necessarily meet with the department as often as we like, but that is also because of the nature of our work in the NCOP. But I think we have had quite a fruitful engagement with the department, and we thank you for that additional detailed information. Let me also thank the commissioner, the DG, and all other officials that made inputs or that made this discussion a lot more fruitful. Deputy Minister, we understand that all government departments are struggling with their budgets, especially in the security, peace and security sector. And we also understand that your department's budget has been cut, but also that your revenue is reduced. But we would still want to encourage the department to find innovative ways to ensure that the important services which you deliver is not compromised significantly by these budget cuts. And as a committee, we will continue to engage with the department on some of the programs that we have discussed today. But there are also other specific areas that will be included in our oversight work in the various provinces, including looking at the capital projects that you presented to us today. But obviously an area of focus of the committee, which we have also prioritized, is around the implementation of legislation. And I think one of the pieces of legislation being the Border Management Authority Act, we would want to also be looking at this, the implementation of this act, and this would also be a focus of area for us in terms of our oversight work. That being said, Deputy Minister and team and honorable members, thank you very much for your attendance and your participation in the session. And let me then declare this meeting closed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Randa.
Thank you, Chairperson.